Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to an SF Live breaking news special and joined by Jason Stirbinskis. He's president, or not president, CEO, managing director. He's from Australia. There's no CEOs, presidents. It's managing directors and of Los Cerros mining. And I'm excited to have him on because they just grew their resource by 1.3 million ounces in Colombia. And he's going to give us a lot more insights on why that happened, how that happened, and of course, how did they calculate it. Got a couple questions for him about that resource, and I'm hoping he's answering them straightforward for us. Jason, thanks for coming on the program. Thanks for facing us.
Evening, Guy.
Yeah, good morning to Australia. It's evening here at 7 p.m. I'm actually in Las Vegas right now. I'm on vacation, but we figured this is an important resource update. We got to talk. And why don't you run us through the main numbers and the highlights, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, sure. So just rewinding a little bit, this is the Quinchilla project, and the Tesserito resource is part of that Quinchilla project, but it's not the first resource. We have Miraflores and Dos Quebradas all within about a 3-kilometre radius. So if we wind back 19 months ago, well, 9 months ago, which is when we last spoke, I think we just put out hole 24. So we've spoken on hole 8, hole 24, and now hole 59. And that was sufficient drilling to get us to an inferred resource. So we said in December that we'd go into a mineral resource estimate and put that out to the market yesterday. Obviously, there are different ways you can cut it. The optimized pit shell, so this is using 0.25 gram cutoff, using $1,800 US an ounce for a gold price, and typical operating costs for a project of this nature, gave us a 0.25 gram per tonne cutoff, a head grade of a little over half a gram per tonne for 2.3 million ounces. But we also promoted within that 2 iterations, because that head grade's half a gram, so it's not a spectacular head grade when you look at that iteration. So the 2 we produced used a 0.5 gram per tonne cutoff, and that gave us a head grade of 0.81 and a total resource of 1.3 million ounces, essentially doubling the inventory for Quinchilla. And that's the one that we're focusing on. It's the one that you mentioned in your introduction. And we did another cut as well at 0.6, which essentially gave us a million ounces at a gram per tonne, slightly under 0.94 gram per tonne gold, but we don't factor in metal credits. So there is silver, copper and moly in the system, but we haven't factored that into that grade. So 0.6 gives you a million ounces at a gram, 0.5 cutoff gives you 1.3 million ounces at 0.81. And that ties into a broader Quinchilla resource that we'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure.
Fantastic. All right, now to my follow-up questions. I warned you a little bit. I gave you a heads up, but not much of a heads up because we just came on recording. But a couple things. High grading. Okay, you mentioned that there's a high-grade gold zone in there, actually 0.54 million ounces at 1.23 grams. That's quite significant, actually, if you compare it to the rest. Are you sterilizing the rest, and how much does that affect the economics, and how much quicker could be the payback focusing on that?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer at this stage. Look, let me rewind again and say, look, we've got 3 options here of where to go from here. So we have the advanced Miraflores project, and that's 800 meters away. So it's pretty much the same thing, right? It's only 800 meters away. And that's very advanced and going through final approvals. And that's a reserve there with 3.3 gram per tonne head grade and reasonably robust economics, albeit pretty small. So we've got that one in an advanced stage. The second one, which is what you're alluding to, the second option, is to look at this potential starter pit. Tesserito, the intrusive core daylights, it actually breaks surface, which is quite an unusual thing for a porphyry. And an area, where it hits the surface, we're getting 2 and 3 grams per tonne for 20, 30 metres and so on. And so we do have this starter pit. It's about 500,000 ounces, grading 1.23 grams per tonne. So you look at that and you look at Miraflores being just shy of 500,000 ounces, so a total of 1 million, and that grading at 3.3, and you say, well, there's 1 million ounces at a very, very robust grade. That makes a really compelling option 2, right? So option 1 is the small scale, option 2 is this bigger one. And then, of course, that could then grow. So you address that 1 million ounces of really high-grade material, and then you expand out into those larger pit envelopes that I was talking about before, ultimately to 2.3 million ounces at Tesserito. But, you also factor in the other resources at Quinchilla. For a total, we've got 2.6 million ounces at a gram now sitting in that Quinchilla region. Yeah. And then the third option is to just keep on building these resources and growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And maybe of a size where it's no longer achievable for a junior, and someone with deeper pockets and stronger balance sheet steps in.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to pocket the question as a follow-up to number 3 there. But just quickly, since you brought up Miraflores, metallurgy to Tesserito is similar, identical.
We've just commissioned the metallurgy, so I don't know the answer to your question, to be honest. That's the next phase, right? So we've got the samples selected, and they're on their way to start that metallurgical test work program. But it's a porphyry, and porphyries are fairly consistent around the world, so I'm not expecting too many major surprises there. Miraflores is not a porphyry, it's a breccia pipe, so it does have different characteristics to it, particularly when we talk about physical characteristics, being a breccia. But presumably its source is a porphyry. And so maybe we can draw some comparisons there, but it's better to wait on the met results and to make a call.
I was just wondering, like, I'm way too far off in my head already. Is like how you can mix the resource and throw it into the same plant and same flow sheets and all that. I'm way too far down the road already.
Well, that's the next step, Kai. So we're doing the metallurgy now, and then on the back of that, we have all the detailed metallurgy of Miraflores, and then on the back of the metallurgy out of Tesserito, we'll commission a PEA, and that'll look at exactly that, the possible scenarios and synergies with Miraflores, Tesserito, and Dos Quebradas. There's another 500,000 ounce resource about 2 kilometers away.
Yeah, we're going to get to the PA in a second. I want to stay on Tesserito for just one more on the resource that you just put out. A couple things I noticed: input parameters, $1,800 gold. I like referencing Barrick, and for me, they're ultra conservative. They're using $1,250 in all their resource calculations and reserve calculations, which is, in my opinion, too low personally. But what do I know? You used 1,800, which is much closer to the current gold price right now. Can you elaborate a little bit? Why did you use that gold price, and how did you find that price and use it?
Yeah, I was just in consultation with the independent consulting house that built the resource for us on what was a typical grade to US dollar per ounce to use, and what their experience was. And we settled on 1,800 being a reasonable indicator of where things are likely to hover for the next few years or go north of. That was essentially the science behind it.
Okay, no, fair enough. I'm just always curious, like when I see those numbers, because they do affect a little bit the resource calculation and the pit optimization of the pit shell, how you draw it, of course, right? One other thing, and I think you half answered it already in one of your previous answers, is the mining cost. You're using $2.50. That's a number that stuck out to me. Part of the resource is outcropping. Is that part of it? Why the resource, like $2.50, is fairly low? Is that part of it? The outcrop part?
Yeah, that's right. This is unusual. I mean, it's conveniently pit-shaped for a start. The mineralisation is pit-shaped, so that was a great help. If you look at the stripping ratio, by the way, on that 0.25 permutation, the stripping ratio was 0.75 waste to 1 ore. So a pretty spectacular stripping ratio. The fact that it's on the surface, using local references, the group that did the work for us was Snowden Tiro. And obviously they have a lot of experience in this area, so that was based on their experience. And then also we have a project to our north that I tend to look at a fair bit called Gramalote. That's more advanced than us, so it's not directly comparable to us, but that's 4 million ounces at 0.73 grams per tonne, and a lot of their drivers are public, and so we obviously referenced those and looked at those and used those as guides as well.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Just some numbers that stuck out, so that I wanted to follow up with you on. That's great. What are some of the next steps? You mentioned the PA, obviously, right? And I really want to run through, like, how you talked option 3 as well. Let's throw that in together, maybe in the same question. Option 3 was drilling your brains out until the project is too big, and then the PEA. So is option 3 even feasible when you mentioned the PEA, or are you cutting your legs off before you can even run?
Interesting way of putting it, Guy. No, look, I think those 3 options should proceed concurrently. There's no reason to put all their eggs in one basket here. So we're developing or progressing the final approvals for Miraflores. We're building the PEA over what we've got so far. And we also, we've got $17 million in the bank, and we've got 5 rigs running continuously 24 hours a day. None of those rigs are drilling at the locations of the 3 resources we have. They're all drilling at new targets in the area. So we're running all 3. That program, 30,000 meters of drilling planned, hopefully will deliver another Tesserito. And just to put that into perspective, it took us 23,000 meters to fully describe Tesserito and get to an inferred resource, and we've got 30,000 meters in our work plan.
Fantastic. All right, you mentioned strong cash position, close to $18 million. in between our last interview and now, you raised $20 million. Like, can you give us an update on where did the money come from, and did you add any new shareholders? Obviously, so.
It was on the back of roadshows, virtual roadshows we were doing in North America, actually. And, I think our story being in Colombia resonates far better with the North American markets than it does with the Australian market. And so we wanted to test that a little further and see where we ended up. And so through the assistance by Sprott, we did a virtual roadshow through various funds in the US and in Canada. And on the back of that roadshow, one group, I can identify one of them was Franklin Templeton. They are over 5% and therefore have exposed or released or revealed the fact that they're a shareholder. Requested to participate in a raising, and then another fund of equal caliber, top 5 in the world, also said we want to participate. And that was essentially the catalyst for going into a trading halt. $10 million went to those 2 key players. And then we raised another 10 from loyal shareholders in Australia to give us $20 million. And as you pointed out, we've got about 18 million in the bank now.
Fantastic. All right, that's great feedback. I do have to ask you, and I warned you I'd ask you about it as well. Well, are you going to do a list now in Canada as well, or in the US even, since you've attracted these strong caliber shareholders, or high caliber?
Well, look, that's a really interesting question, because we obviously appealed to some of the most well-informed, sophisticated investors in the world and had them participate, and we're not listed on the TSX. So you've got to factor that in as well. But look, I think the story we have resonates far better in North America. If that requires us moving to the TSX then, or dual listing or something like that, then sure, we need to consider that, and it's one of many options we have in front of us.
Fantastic. Jason, some of the next steps, you are infill drilling for the PA, for a resource update as well. Run us through the next catalyst, some of the news flow we can expect.
Well, as I had mentioned earlier, we've got 5 rigs running, and none of those are infill drilling. They're all testing new targets. We have one to the south, actually, called Cerros, and last time we spoke, 9 months ago, that was just a sniff of something interesting at that point. We've drilled 6 holes there, and we've essentially hit another porphyry. Not high grade, not exciting grades yet, but 500 meters at half a gram twice from surface. So pretty good results there. We have 3 drill rigs there right now drilling this very moment. We have another rig drilling between Tesserito and Miraflores. That's a whole new conversation for us to have next time, Kai. But it looks like Tesserito and Miraflores are potentially one system joining together in the middle. So we're drilling that to test that theory right now. We've finished the first hole, 1.2 kilometers downhole, so a very, very deep hole. We've started our second one there as well. We have a 5th rig drilling to the north of Tesserito at a brand new target called Cerros. So in terms of news flow, that's obviously the next flow of information, is that 5 drill program, and hopefully you're revealing another big discovery.
Fantastic. Jason, while I have you, I do have to ask you something a little off-brand here, but you, in your press release, you're saying Tesserito has the hallmarks of a major discovery. And now I'm wondering, that's more of a general discussion, how do you define a discovery? Like, everybody's been throwing that word around, especially in North America, from what I'm seeing, like discovery here, discovery there, and they only took a channel sample, right? How do you define a discovery?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. I think 1 million ounces is sort of interesting, but if you want to justify putting major in front of it, I think it's got to be a 5 something. Yeah. Now, just to put that in perspective, Quinchilla as a cluster, 3 kilometre radius, is 2.6 million ounces at a gram per tonne. If you want to get more liberal and look at lower cutoffs, just at 0.25 gram per tonne in the unconstrained resource of Tesserito, so not inside the pit, that's 3.4 million ounces there. But it's unconstrained, so it's not within the pit. So we're getting there. We're getting there. It's not, as you say, two drill results and us speculating, but we're getting close to being able to claim that hand on heart.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for humoring me. I thought of that. Just like I was reading through it, it's like, okay, so he actually doesn't call it a discovery yet. That's actually interesting, because everybody else and their dog names everything they find a discovery. So that's why I felt it was a good time to catch up on that and see how you define it. Jason, thank you so much for joining us for this breaking news special. It was great catching up. Let's not wait another 9 months for another interview. Let's keep this. Let's do this more regularly. And good luck with the new discoveries there. And can't wait to see a PA.
Perfect. Keep in touch.
Fantastic. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. SF Live Breaking News Special. Make sure to smash that like button. This way, YouTube algorithm will pick up the interview or the conversation and will share it with like-minded investors. And of course, leave a comment if you have any questions for either Jason or myself, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much, and we'll be back with more soon.